Hello and welcome to another LinkedIn Live broadcast brought to you by MedStar Health. I'm your host, Andrea Roane, and today we're going to try to answer a big question. That question is, how do you build a healthier business? Whether you're an employee, a manager, or a business owner, there's a good chance that well-being is now part of your focus. According to a recent Gallup poll, only 24% of workers strongly agreed that their organization cares about their well-being. In these times of continued stress, we're all trying to figure out what we can do to improve our own well-being and well-being across our organizations. For example, the National Academy of Medicine published a call to action for a national plan to improve workforce well-being just last month. But we do have some good news. 9 MedStar Health organizations were recently recognized by the Maryland Department of Health's Maryland's Healthiest Businesses program for their success building cultures of well-being in the workplace. Of the 48 organizations honored with the 2022 Wellness at Work recognitions, MedStar Health organizations made up almost 20% of the list. So what can be learned from MedStar Health's success? That's our focus for the next hour with our panel of experts featuring Dr. Dan Marchalik, Executive Director of MedStar Health Center for Wellbeing. Registered nurse Crystal Morales, Director of Nurse Wellbeing for the center. Reverend Cherie Smith, Director of Pastoral Care at MedStar Franklin Square Medical Center. Andrea Hamilton, the Program Coordinator of Health Connections at MedStar St. Mary's Hospital, and Sarah Ridenauer, who'll be moderating your live questions today. And if you have a question for our panel, please feel free to post in our chat. We'll get to as many of them as we can later in our broadcast. But we want to kick things off now with Dr. Dan Marchalik. And Dr. Marchalik, I have 2 questions for you, basically. What, in your opinion, makes a healthy business, and what's MedStar Health doing that's so right?
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and it's a great question to start with. I think there's a couple of things that go into creating a healthy work environment. Probably at the core of it is the idea of having a safety culture, knowing that you feel safe to be able to speak up, and knowing that when you speak up, that it leads to change, that what you say is actually heard. I think another big part of it is the feeling of being a part of the team. This is actually something that Chris Sinski from the AMA talks about quite a bit, the idea of teamwork, that having a core team that is a consistent team improves safety, improves well-being, and I think improves professional fulfillment. And I think another big piece is leadership, really wellness-centered leadership, knowing that you can go to your leader with concerns, knowing that your leader will have your back and support you and be invested in your personal and professional development. You had asked like what MedStar had done that worked well, and I think that the biggest thing, by far the biggest thing that MedStar did, was being very deliberate about investing in well-being, saying this is a core priority for us as a system. And actually for us, the well-being program launched long before the pandemic. It started in 2017. And I think that deliberate investment in well-being, saying that we really care about our workforce and we're going to invest in making sure that they're well, I think that has been a real differentiator for us. And it made us prepared to ramp up our various initiatives and programs when things got very difficult during the pandemic.
We know things were very difficult during the pandemic, and we understand the importance of well-being in that era coming forward. But what made it a deliberate priority in 2017, 2018? What was the culture? What were you seeing among your associates?
Well, I mean, we know that healthcare can be a challenging field. For example, like, there's good data to suggest that rates of distress are significantly higher among various professions within healthcare relative to other professions, right? It can be a difficult and a high stress situation. There's issues with moral injury. There's issues with high responsibility, high stakes. The idea that a lot of times all of us in healthcare are bearing witness to some of the most difficult and some of the best moments of people's lives, and it's a lot of pressure and a big weight to carry. And so for us, we knew that we needed to support our workforce, because at the end of the day, it all ends and begins with our workforce. And so, yeah, those stressors have been there. Some of them have been exacerbated by the pandemic, but a lot of them are just inherent to the profession of healthcare in general.
All right, Crystal, doctor was talking about the professionals bearing the weight, the good and the bad. As a nurse focused on well-being, you've seen firsthand how resiliency can transform the lives of frontline healthcare workers. Speaking to workers in all industries, how can someone tell if they're in need of some well-being resources? Are there common signs?
Unfortunately, most of us have experienced bad work environments or will at some point in our life, and I think they're pretty common. But what we're talking about is a little bit more than just that exhaustion or working long shift. This is really that dread, that feeling of isolation that you get that starts before you go to work and lasts long after your shift. It starts, at night when you're setting the alarm clock and you're dreading it going off in the morning. You don't want to get out of your car when you get to work. You don't want to go in, and you're just watching the hours pass because you really want to leave that environment. You just feel isolated, and it's just not healthy. So those are the things that we're sharing with our associates, getting them to pay attention to those signs so they know before they get to that to reach out, so we can talk about what resources are available and really kind of help them in those spaces, whatever those spaces are, work or home life.
As you said, this is something more than just the normal dread of going to work that Monday morning or whatever. There's a difference. Go into the difference a little bit more on why this makes it a priority to address.
Well, I mean, if we can get people before they get into those areas of exhaustion, that burnout that we talk about, that everybody's talking about right now, we can actually help people. We use a stress continuum. So if you think about the 4 different areas of the stress continuum, which is a beautiful tool to use, being living your best life ever, as you transition to the stress continuum, you start to experience more profound impact. So this isn't just day-to-day, wear, and this isn't just a wear and tear. This is an accumulation of those stressors that are impacting you both personally and professionally. So it's a little bit different than just being tired or just having a bad day at work. This is really an accumulation, if you will.
Almost paralyzing.
It can be for folks. Yes, absolutely. It absolutely can be.
All right, Crystal, we'll get back to you in a few minutes. We want to turn to Reverend Cherie Smith, who's headed up one of these important well-being committees at MedStar Franklin Square Hospital in Baltimore. Reverend Smith, what have you found to be some of the most important well-being efforts for your team?
Thanks for asking me, because I'm so excited and proud of all the work that the whole system has been doing. Our team in particular, our most effective things have been around communication, wellness rounding, and our relaxation rooms. When our team first got together, which was a little later, we kind of got together in the beginning of 2020. We were amazed by everything that the Center for Wellbeing had already gathered and provided for our associates. So our number one task was communication. How could we get that good news out to our associates? So we leveraged every in-house communication device we had, newsletters, screens, everything. And then we did our wellness rounding, which is a part of communication. We took an old crash cart, filled it full of goodies and stress reduction tools, but most importantly, resources that showed them, there you go, see that QR code?
Mm-hmm.
This was a great tool that Crystal and Dan and that team put together that we could share with our associates and say, go here, scan that QR code and search for all the cool supportive resources MedStar has for you. Then we also, as Crystal mentioned, the stress continuum, we would educate our staff about that so they can check in on their own stress level and their peers. We did some mini interventions with stress rings and grounding rocks. And mostly we were just there. We were present and we listened. Then the third thing that was very effective were our recharge rooms. We created 5 recharge rooms with the help from funds from the Center for Wellbeing. Each one had a full body massage chair, a sound machine, quiet lights, just a quiet space to get away. Because all the research shows that even getting away from a stressful environment for 10 or 15 minutes really mitigates the harmful effects of chronic stress. So that's the function these rooms had. And they were right on the unit, so a person didn't have to walk 10 minutes to get to one. They could step off quickly, get away from it, take a breather, and then come back stronger and more grounded.
Cherie, tell us a little bit more about what happens in these quick mini stress first aid clinics.
Well, I happen to have some with us. Well, we go over, as Crystal mentioned, the stress continuum, and then we did little stress reduction aids. Like this is a stress reduction ring. I don't know if you can see it. Gives you an instant little mini massage. We offered grounding rocks, anything that could help a person kind of come back down into their core, not feel so scattered. So we would offer them, as well as candy, chocolate and sour candy. But mostly the cart was the draw. The purpose was to get the word out about all the resources available for them.
As we said in the beginning, you're one of the important well-being committees. How difficult was it to form the committees? Difficult getting volunteers, or was it made easier because there were so many resources you could turn to from the Wellbeing Center?
Right. We felt a little intimidated that we didn't know all this stuff was happening. So we had to stop for a minute and educate ourselves about everything that was out there. I thought it would be hard, Andrea, but I should have known better, because the people that work here are really committed to taking care of their patients. And I think the pandemic made them even more interested in taking care of each other. So there were folks who didn't have a lot of time to spare, but they wanted to help any way they could. So no, we have quite a big team from a lot of different areas in the hospital.
So not hard finding volunteers at all to work with.
It was hard for them to find the time to do everything we wanted to do, but not hard to find folks who wanted to help.
All right, that sounds good. Let's turn to Andrea Hamilton. And we know that on top of the system-wide support provided by the MedStar Health Center for Wellbeing, individual hospitals and workplaces have been doing so much to improve well-being for many years, including MedStar St. Mary's Hospital, where you're based, Andrea. In fact, they received the exemplar distinction from the Maryland Department of Health, which is the highest grade given in the wellness at work recognitions. Congratulations, first and foremost. But tell us, Andrea, how did your team do it?
So it took some time. It definitely took us time over the years to build up to that. We actually decided, so each year you have to fill out the Wellness at Work scorecard on the CDC website, and that evaluates all the different areas of wellness. So that gave us a really good starting point, some great feedback on maybe where we needed improvement, what we were doing well. So we just used that to evaluate and set goals for the upcoming year and see where we could improve. And so we did that over the last several years. And like I said, worked our way up the ladder until we received that exemplar the last 2 years. We also reach out to the associates, just like with the wellness rounding. We want to know what is important to them. What does well-being mean to them? What do they value? How do we make their workday better? So those are some things. I mean, and we do regular polls with them, surveys, so all kinds of different ways that we do try to get their opinion on things. And if we're not offering what people are interested in, what's helpful to them and what they value, what are we doing?
A common thread talking with all of you, Andrea, seems to be the importance of listening to the associates. That we can't minimize the importance of listening, can we?
We cannot. I mean, you have an event because someone else decided that was a great thing at their organization, and then no one at yours shows up. So that tells you right away, you need to listen to what people want.
All right, Andrea, thank you. We want to turn now to Sarah Ridenauer, who's monitoring your live questions. Sarah, what are the audiences interested in?
We don't have any questions yet from the audience, but if you have any, please leave them in the comments, excuse me, and we will make sure to answer those.
Well, we'll hopefully get to their questions, but we have more questions for the panel. Going back to Dr. Marchalik, in a time when it's hard to retain and recruit people in just about all fields and especially healthcare, how do you think this recognition and all you've done for well-being translates to recruiting associates who want to stay with the organization?
That's a really good question. I think it's no secret that we are in the midst of a really atypical moment for labor markets, right? It's like it's been called the Great Resignation, the Great Labor Migration, and I think it's true. And there's a lot of shifting around because it used to be that healthcare organizations were kind of competing against other healthcare organizations. That's not true anymore. It's all interprofessional, right? Healthcare organizations are competing with banks. Banks are competing with hospitals. Hospitals are competing with, daycare centers. It's just, it's everywhere. But I do think that this is exactly why well-being is so important. It is the differentiator, because a lot of times the workforce is signaling what matters to them. And one of the things that really matters to them is what the experience of working somewhere actually feels like. And that's what the well-being program, that's what makes it so important. We certainly we stress it, we make it a point for our current associates. We make sure that we communicate in the ways and that have been mentioned before, right? The QR codes and the wellness rounds and the flyers and the plasma screens. We also want to make sure that we signal to our prospective hires, people who are looking to switch jobs. By the way, if you're looking to switch jobs, MedStar Health is the place to work. It is the best well-being program. And that matters, right? You spend so much of your life at work. You want it to be the place where you don't just kind of make it. You want it to be a place where you thrive. And that's really our goal with the Center for Wellbeing.
Doctor, I heard a CBS News report recently about how much talent the Army is losing because of lack of childcare for their associates. They're driving 3 hours to get to childcare. And you said earlier that you invested in what we found we needed, formed boots on the ground, and addressed unique local needs such as childcare. What's been the response, and how are you responding to the need for childcare for your associates?
Yeah, that's a great example of listening to our associates. That's exactly right. And another great example of having the infrastructure ahead of time. We knew in 2017, 2018 that this was a huge priority for people, that being able to balance work life and home life, being able to make sure that both, not just child, but child and adult care, that they had options, was a huge priority for people. So we made sure that backup childcare became available. And then during the pandemic, when, as everybody on this LinkedIn Live is aware, childcare became much more complicated with school closures and daycare closures, we expanded that program. And it was a huge differentiator for people, both in knowing what to do, knowing that there's a place you can turn, that your organization will support you in being able to figure out how your childcare needs, but also being able to keep coming to work, because childcare is something that actually was figured out for you. So yeah, that's a great example of listening to our associates, and when you do listen, you're building the types of programs that matter to them.
Crystal's listening to the nurses and others on the front line every day. Crystal, the recognition that MedStar Health has received from the state of Maryland, does it make a difference? Does it say something about MedStar Health as a place to work?
It absolutely does. I mean, Dan mentioned, the competitive market. And so this makes a difference. And it's so nice to have all of the work validated by a third party, validating the breadth and the depth of the work that's going on. I'd also like to point out what everyone doesn't see here. I mean, we have, of course, Reverend Cherie and Andrea representing their teams, but think about the hundreds of people, the boots on the ground, who made all of this work possible, that are invested in ensuring that we get, these awards, and listening to what their associates want, and making sure we have well-being in the workplace. And so we are really just a small representation of the bigger picture of these well-being committees that exist across MedStar Health. So it really does take a village. And it's great because there's, an opportunity such as this LinkedIn Live to really talk about, this recognition, this opportunity, because there was a lot of hard work that went into this.
We talked about with Dr. Cherie Smith about wellness rounds. Can you explain what happens on wellness rounds that helps make a difference?
Well, sure.
Crystal.
For Crystal, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
Well,
all right. We do wellness rounds together. So Reverend Cherie and I have had our fair share of wellness rounds. I think the difference for me personally is that, when we think about different platforms that we communicate with individuals, if you think about healthcare settings, they are working on the front lines with our patients. And so I think it was really important for all of us here to take the resources to them. That was the biggest difference, is to really build that rapport and say, I see you, I know you're working hard, I want to hear you, and I want to bring the resource to you because I know that you're already tired. So what can I do for you? And I think that's the difference what Wellness Rounds was, is it really going, advocating for them, helping them navigate resources and supporting them to the best of our ability.
Dr. Smith, you wanted to say something about wellness rounds at Franklin Square Medical Center. Talk about what happens there.
Oh, Crystal named it. Just the idea of us taking the resources to them and having the time to listen to what they have to say. Mm-hmm. Instead of having them take the initiative, it's us going to them, taking the initiative.
Reverend Smith, at this time, so many people are turning to spirituality in times of hardship. What is the role of spirituality in improving well-being for patients and associates at MedStar Health?
Spirituality at heart, it's about what gives our lives meaning and purpose. It's what helps us feel like we have connection and what we value. So in that sense of spirituality, it's key to feeling like we're well or having well-being.
Did your team want that as a component of your program?
Let me put it this way. Our associates did not come to us wanting to have a religious conversation, but they did come to us wanting to talk about meaning, about value, about what their work meant to them. And they would talk about how to kind of get back in touch with their spirit or brighten their spirit in the middle of all this stress. So in that sense, it was spiritual, although not necessarily religious, as we're just helping people feel connected and find meaning. A lot of that had to do with being present and creating that safe space for them to tell their story and for them to hear their own story. Because sometimes they don't really know how they feel till they talk about it. And one of the interesting things is, we've mentioned this stress first aid and this stress continuum. What's interesting to me is that the main components of stress first aid care, to me, they're spiritual, because they're all about caring for each other and making connections. So in that way, I feel like all of this work is spiritual. But I will say, on the religious side of things, very, very few of our associates have ever minded if we said, hey, I'm praying for you every day.
Exactly.
So they, they like that. Or sometimes people who may not be spiritual at all would say, are you praying for us? I said, absolutely, every day.
You're talking about healthcare workers and that community, but part of what we're talking about today is how this can go across all industries. What about other industries? What can they learn from what you're talking about, is Reverend Smith, as far as spirituality and what a difference it could make?
I think the idea of making a space for associates have a chance to talk about meaning and value and what their work means to them and how they feel like the work they're doing is kind of living out their values. Instead of just coming in and getting your job done, are there opportunities for people to talk about meaning and value in their life and in their work?
All right, thank you very much. Let's go back to Sarah Ridenauer to find out if we have any questions from our audience, or are they just listening to what we have to say, taking in the good information?
I'll say, yeah, they're just taking in all the good information. No questions yet, but I actually have a question that I got me thinking about, tips that you guys might have to step away from work. I know that for me personally, like working at home, it's kind of hard sometimes to stop working because I have the opportunity to work until 10 p.m. and get things done. Or I feel like, I kind of have to get something done because I do have, everything at home that I need to. So what are some tips that you guys might have for that? Like, taking time to step away from your work?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually, the blurring of the lines of home and work, the idea that like, is it work from, live at the office or are we working from home? It's a really good question, and it is something that we're still grappling with because it's a new adjustment, right? There was some work from home before, but certainly not to the extent that it is now. I think being deliberate is a huge part of it. I know that there are many people I know will literally on their work calendar will put in things like, for example, the last meeting, let's say, ends at 5, and from 5 to 6:30, they'll put in, I don't know, gym, right? From 7 to 8:30, they'll put in like dinner with the family. And not everybody needs that, and that's certainly not the only solution. But sometimes we're so used to our calendar, we're so used to kind of being to answering to our calendar that you just put the things on the calendar that are valuable to you, that include taking care of yourself.
I'll jump in on this part of it too, Sarah. I had a conversation with one executive, and she would have white spaces on her calendar. Those were her times just for herself. Instead of even timing her activities, she would leave it blank so that she was free to do or not do anything she wanted. So white spaces on the calendar rather than always filling in the calendar, even with relaxation activities.
Yeah, that would be very helpful because, yeah, like I said, sometimes I'll be, sitting and relaxing, watching TV, and my work laptop's just staring at me. And it's like stuff that I know I can get done now and should get done, so it can be hard. But yeah, I think definitely blocking times out in my calendar would be another, visual reminder of take a break. You're good. You don't need to be working just because your laptop's right there. So that's great. Thank you.
Throwing this out to the entire panel, Sarah's bringing this home. Well, at home is family who is affected by her stresses at work. So how do you deal with the entire family, not just the associate that you see every day, but knowing that they're bringing some of their issues back from the office to home or vice versa? So what are you doing for families? How do you address the whole associate? So anybody would like to start?
I can jump in. I think that was something we saw very early on, is that when we were doing wellness rounds and I would say, tell me how you are today, and the nurses or our care associates would say, Crystal, I'm fine, but this is what I'm dealing with at home. And so we collectively were seeing this across MedStar Health. And it was because, again, we were listening to our associates, where we were able to take it back to our leaders and say, our associates' families need support. They need a little bit more support. And so we were able to secure resources to get them just in time support. And that may be coaching, it may be counseling, it may be access to a psychologist or a psychiatrist just in time. There is very limited access. And so we have protected time for our associates and for their children. So at MedStar Health, what I think makes it so special is that when we talk about family, our family is defined a little bit differently. And I always say family is anybody that lives under our roof. I'll share with you that I share that you don't have to be married to them or give birth to them. If you share a roof with them, they're important to you. And so that's your family. And so we do extend those services. And that's really what we've been doing in that space for our associates and their families.
Dr. Marchalik, Crystal talked earlier about dread and people feeling not that they were engaged in the process, isolated, stressed, stressors that could signal mental health issues in associates needing help. Dr. Marchalik, as you invested in what you found out from your associates that they needed, mental health appointments are hard to get in general. How do you address those needs? And Crystal, we can ask you that as well, but Dr. Marchalik, how do you address the needs and help people who need mental health assistance in a timely fashion?
So it's a really, really good question, and I think a lot of people are aware that it's become increasingly difficult to get access to mental health support, because because of how much distress there is. So yeah, we did a lot to try to kind of preempt these issues. We have an expedited mental health appointment program available to all of our associates. We also have an expedited program for our associates' kids. Speaking to what Crystal was just mentioning, we have full-time licensed clinical social workers who are our resilience coaches, who are literally on the ground connecting with people every single day. We have expedited therapy sessions. We have unlimited coaching available for patients. For our associates and their family members, right? So again, we're thinking holistically about the entire family unit, but we're also thinking about the entire spectrum of type of support that people need. Some people might need a psychiatric or a psychology therapy appointment. Some people might want some coaching. Some people might want some resilience techniques, and there's an entire spectrum in the middle. And so we're trying to make sure we're supporting people across that entire continuum so that we're not giving them a one-size-fits-all, but really catering to their needs.
This is something you've been working on, as we said, for 4 years. But what about someone who feels that they're working in an environment that is unhealthy? How did they change that? What are the steps they need to take down the road to get to a healthy business environment?
Yeah, that's a really good and a really difficult question, right? Because there are some things that are not necessarily within our control, right? Like there are things that sometimes we can't do anything about because of the environment that we work in. I guess one important thing is to try to understand exactly what it is that's making your environment unhealthy. Like, what are the parts that are not working? What are the parts that are making this a difficult place for you to work? And work with leadership, right? I think a lot of leaders are also going through, are also in a really stressful moment right now. But I think everybody's looking to try to make things better and to band together. So build those teams, build those coalitions, try to, if there is a well-being task force or a well-being program, become a part of it. But I mean, at the end of the day, I do recognize that there are limits to what we can do, right? And a lot of times well-being is actually dictated by system level issues that are not within anyone's individual control. So one of the other pieces here is to kind of be charitable with yourself, right? Sometimes you're in a situation that is difficult and you're in an environment that's not invested in your well-being, and it's not your fault that you're in that environment. And it's sometimes that's just a reality of a workplace. And I think recognizing that is important too.
Doctor, a lot of the programs, especially small business owners, would look at and say, they put money behind that. They have resources. I don't have resources. I don't have that kind of money. What do you say? How do you budget for some of these programs? Do you do as many? Do you do fewer? What's the response?
That's a great question. I would say this. You can't boil the ocean, right? So you don't have to do absolutely everything and try to fix all the things. Start with one. Like, start with individual issues. Start by listening. Start by figuring out what are the top pain points, what are the top priorities for your teams. And this comes back full circle to where we began. You've got to listen to your associates, because the friction that they might experience in their work is going to be different across different work environments, even within the same industries. I think listen to people and just start. Nothing is more important than just getting started. Put together a task force. Become more aware of the idea of wellness-centered leadership. This idea that as a leader, you have a huge impact on the well-being of your workers. So I think at the end that's pretty much my recommendation is you got to start somewhere, but nothing is as important as getting started.
Doing something. Andrea, based on your experience and success with your award-winning program at MedStar St. Mary's, what can people do in their own workplace to improve their situation? We heard what Dr. Marchalik gave. Anything you want to add to that?
So that was just exactly what I was going to say. You have to get started. You have to start somewhere. So an easy place to start is by filling out that CDC worksite health scorecard. You can just Google that. The scorecard pops up. You just fill out which you're just checking boxes. It's a pretty basic scorecard. And it really is a great way to find out what you're already doing. You have to know what you offer already in order to find out what you need to offer. So that gives you a great starting place. I will say it can be a little overwhelming when you're first getting started. You're like, oh my goodness, we need more boxes. We need to be able to check more boxes. So really just take a deep breath and you know, just start slowly, pick one or two doable goals, set those, get going on them. And I know we've said this so many times today, but find out also what the employees are looking for, you know, what makes their workday better. We actually went around and asked associates, what can we do as your wellness committee just to make your workday a little bit better? So we got some wonderful responses from that. And then I also cannot stress enough, just engage your leadership. It's amazing to me that, you know, we have these ideas and we can just talk to leaders about it and it's not anything crazy. They're just so open to well-being here. The changes that have occurred in the last 5 years have been amazing for me to watch and to be part of. So take some time to engage that leadership. It will take a little bit, but it is so worth it.
All right, everybody's talking about listening. Crystal, this would be a great time to pitch your podcast called Scrub In, which is not just for people who work in healthcare. Why did you decide to make a podcast for well-being for MedStar Health? And how can people listen to your podcast?
I really wanted to just create a community where people felt connected and wanted to have a platform where people could listen to short topics that we don't have opportunities in the healthcare setting to talk about, right? We're busy from the time we walk in the door to the time we leave. And what I love about Scrub In and hosting at MedStar is that our leaders have given us such a beautiful platform to talk about things that you might not be able to talk about in other industries. We, you know, support our LGBTQI community. We talk about resilience. We talk about mental health. And so it really is an open platform to get information. So you can listen to Scrub In where you get any of your local podcasts.
All right, we're getting ready to wrap up our hour, but are there any exciting initiatives that anyone's working on at their MedStar facilities? Dr. Marchalik, Crystal, Reverend Smith, Andrea, what's happening that's new and exciting and wonderful you want to let everyone know about? Anyone can start. Raise your hand, just go ahead.
Oh, I think they dropped off. I can jump in really quick.
Hey.
So when you think about the lifespan of our nurses and our associates, and there's a lot of longevity there. And so what we're working on right now is building a career hub where people can come in and get anything that they need for the professional development of fulfillment from beginning of your career to the end. And so we're really, really excited to help our associates navigate that space. So really looking forward to building out our career hub.
Yeah.
Yes,
lots
go
of
ahead.
exciting stuff around that entire digital platform. It's the career hub is a part of it. There's a parent hub. There's a leadership hub. There's a lot of new exciting resources that we're building out online and new digital resources that we're building. Certainly the increased access for things that parents could find useful, this whole well-being at home, really trying to build out that entire menu of programs. There's a lot of exciting work, again, around expanded childcare, elder care, and digital therapeutics, things that people like apps that are being worked on that people can use to facilitate their well-being. A lot of individual programs happening at the different MedStar hospitals. And that's something certainly that others on this LinkedIn Live can talk about better than me. But it's a lot of it is both individualized work happening at our different entities through the individual local wellness committees, and then system level initiatives that are there to support all associates. And we want to make sure that we're always balancing the two, in like the local needs and the system support.
Well, you seem to have done a good job. The state of Maryland has recognized 9 of your facilities, so congratulations on that. Listening has been the common thread throughout this hour that we spent together, listening to your associates listening to the leaders, and engaging in a communication, a conversation that will lead to well-being. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Marchalik, Krista Morales, Reverend Smith, and Andrea Hamilton, for helping us learn more about the Center for Wellbeing and how you and your teams prioritize well-being at MedStar Health. As part of the Maryland Department of Health recognition, MedStar Health will present the final of a 3-part webinar series on November 10th from 11 a.m. to noon. It's called Engaging Leadership to Promote a Culture of Health. Our leaders will talk about building a culture of health at work, and the public is invited to attend, and we'll put a link to register in the comment section of this event. That is all the time we have for today. If you're interested in learning more about the MedStar Health Center for Wellbeing's offerings for our healthcare workers, you can head to our website. It's medstarhealth.org/wellbeing for more information. That's medstarhealth.org/wellbeing for more information. Also, to check out Crystal's podcast, it's available for you at medstarhealth.org/scrub in one word, or through popular podcast services. As Crystal said, wherever you get your podcast, there you'll find her. And again, we thank all of you for participating, and thank you for watching, and most importantly, thank you for listening. And we wish you a great day. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.